Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Scary topic today. Let's get into it. Redditors related to a psychopath. What was your holy shit, I might get murdered story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My aunt has two kids, both adopted, and all I know about their bio mom is that they were drug addicts. One of them, we'll call her Jane, is my age, and we were always really close, but her older brother John never really hung around us to the point that I barely knew him, even though I spent a ton of time at their house. Anyway, when we were maybe 12, Jane, my sister, and I built a massive blanket fort in the basement and were hanging out in it. John was maybe 15 at the time, and I don't know why he originally came in, but for some reason he decided to mess with us by taking a large kitchen knife and randomly stabbing into the fort. We were trying to crawl away, but he could hear us and follow to whatever section we were in. I'm not sure if blindly stabbing at your relatives can ever really be playful, but this was not it. Jane was screaming at him to stop, and my sister and I were crying. It was terrifying. Finally, my aunt heard us screaming and came down and yelled at him. John claimed it was just a joke and said we were having fun. He's now in the middle of a 25-year prison sentence for murder. I had several with my brother, but the worst was when I woke up to him sitting on my chest with his hands around my throat. He was trying to choke me, but his hands were too small and he didn't get the pressure right, so I ended up with a giant hickey around the entire front of my neck instead of death, all because I ate his last nutty bar. My mom was 19 when I was born, and we had a very close relationship when I was little. She was always more of a friend than a mom, and that's just how our relationship was. Before my stepdad, I was always sarcastic all the time, and we joked around a lot. One morning, my mom asked me to take the pizza boxes from last night's dinner out to the garage where we put the cardboard recycling. I jokingly told her no, as I gathered up the boxes to take them out. I took them out, put them on top of the stack of the other cardboard, and turned around to go back into the house, and I bumped into my stepdad, who had come in behind me without me noticing. He then proceeded to lift my 13-year-old body completely off the ground by my throat and pinned me against the wall of the house. He got in my face and was screaming at me about disrespect. I remember flecks of spit getting on my face. My feet were back on the ground, but I was still pinned as his hands were around my throat. I was able to get one of his hands in my mouth, and I was biting and scratching him. I don't remember what happened next. I don't remember how I got to school. The next thing I remember is sobbing in a private ensemble room in the band hall. My mom still doesn't believe me. Over the next 2 years, he continuously got worse and permanently destroyed my relationship with my mother. I started sleeping with a knife under my pillow when he was home. I started running away and doing drugs. Eventually, my behavior became bad enough that my mom sent me to live with my biological father. Life is better now. I'm safe. I still have the occasional nightmare and cannot stand any sort of confrontation whatsoever, but I'll be okay. I know that's an absolutely terrible thing that you were sent to your biological father's house, but assuming you're in a better place, then good. It's just a shame that, at least by the story, your mother chose this guy over you. Not me, but my cousin, 11 at the time, was caught smoking and skipping school by my mother. My mom told him she didn't care about him skipping school because his mother wouldn't have cared, but told him not to smoke by her car. He didn't like being told what to do, so he grabbed my brother, 2 at the time, by the hand and walked him out into the middle of the road by a blind corner. He sat my brother down and told him not to move, then he walked away. Luckily, a neighbor had seen what had happened and grabbed my brother before a car could hit him. That cousin is now in an Indonesian prison, possibly facing the death sentence for smuggling drugs, by the way. Dreams really do come true, I guess. I don't think my sister would murder me per se, because she enjoyed abusing me too much to straight up kill me, lol. One of the biggest things that sticks out from my childhood growing up with her abuse was occasionally if I was sitting on the couch, back of couch facing kitchen, she'd come up behind me and run a butcher knife along my shoulders and neck until I turned around and realized she had a knife. I think she just enjoyed the fear in me realizing what was going on. That look of, oh my god, that was a knife? Why the F do you have a knife? My sister did shit like this my whole childhood, and even after she was 19 and I was 17, she'd do crazy shit like throw a knife across the living room at me if she was mad enough at me. I cut contact with her as soon as I was able to leave at 18. My dad has NPD and is generally an emotionalist asshole. When I was in middle school, I stepped on a stick in our yard and a piece broke off in my foot. My dad is a software engineer and used to go on site to build databases that help switch patient data to digital through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. It gave him a real complex about not being a doctor, and he stole tools and little pieces of equipment and would wear scrubs all of the time. It also meant he refused to take me to the ER for a super simple thing. He heated up a pair of medical scissors and cut the heel of my foot open while pretending to play doctor. At several times, my mom opened the door to tell me to stop screaming so she could hear her phone conversation. I have a cousin who I always knew was kind of crazy. We live in a major city, and he never leaves his family's apartment. He just stays in the apartment drawing and playing games. But even though he's weird, I didn't really mind because he's usually very sweet and wouldn't hurt a fly, or so I thought. When I was in college, I took him and my friend to see a concert. We got pretty drunk, and when we came back, we were hanging out in his living room. His parents were out of town. He started drawing in his little book, and I asked to see it. Turns out, he was drawing me sitting there. It was an extremely detailed drawing, and accurate drawing of me. I flipped through the book and found all sorts of cool creatures and landscapes until I landed on a drawing of his brother, dead and mutilated. An extremely detailed drawing. Turn the page, my dad, dead and mutilated. Turn the page, me, dead and mutilated. Quietly, my cousin says, did you find the drawings of the family? I was in shock and disbelief. What the F is this? Why the F would you draw our family like this? He says something like, I think about it all the time. I think about killing you and the rest of them all the time. My friend and I look at each other, frightened and silently planning on how we're going to get out of there. Our shoes were off and our stuff was downstairs. He could see we were upset. He looked disappointed, like we were trying to upset him. Are you scared? And as he said that, he moved to the kitchen. You had to go past the kitchen to get out of the apartment. I was really worried that he was going to get a knife and try to stab us or something. I said, no, they're really good. Just was surprised at first. They're really impressive, though. I had to basically placate him into thinking I was okay with the drawings so that he would leave us and leave us alone. He never did anything like this again, but he gets really weird and creepy whenever he drinks or smokes weed. I told my parents about what happened, and they just kind of shrugged it and said, wow, that's weird. Maybe it was just art, and it's a dark but creative outlet. Or maybe he wanted to murder you. Not a family member, but my mother dated a crazy person after her divorce. We moved into an apartment, and he moved in with us not long after. He had long hair and blue eyes and a beard and was the spitting image of white Jesus. And he took it to heart after a few people told him about the resemblance. He pulled me aside one day and told me that he had a secret and he wanted to tell me, but I couldn't tell anyone else because the government was looking for him. He confided in me that he was, in fact, Jesus Christ, and that he escaped from a government facility after being captured in 1964. He said he escaped with the help of the Pope during his visit to the USA. The Pope's private security force broke him out, and once he was free, the Pope advised him to blend in with regular people. He said the Pope told him to not draw any attention to himself, so no miracles, and tell no one. But he trusted me with this information. Jesus Christ was a roofer, in case you were curious. He constantly carried around his roofing hammer, and one day it went missing. Jesus lost the shit. He locked my mother, my girlfriend, and myself in our apartment until it was found. This lasted 3 days, was he resurrected. I was 18 at the time and was much larger than him and would have no problem physically removing Jesus from our apartment, but my mother, Mary, insisted he was having a mental episode, and if I hurt him or did anything, it may mess him up even worse. Turns out, he left the hammer, which is really pretty much a hatchet, at the job site, and a coworker drove over to return it. I sat there like an idiot and watched this guy hand an effing axe to this lunatic and did nothing. Big mistake. Our 3-day-long lockdown turned into 5 days. The final 2 days was this illiterate nutcase attempting to read aloud from the Bible, getting maybe 1 in 5 words right. Remember in school when the teacher would have people read aloud and go around the room, and there was always a dude you knew couldn't read for shit, and his part would last 10 times longer than everyone else's part? Imagine that for 48 hours. Jesus would only let us eat bread and wine, and the bread ran out quickly. There was a lake outside our apartment, and on the fifth day, Jesus was looking through the blinds at the lake and called me over to him. He confided in me again. He said, "You know I could walk right across that lake and right up into heaven?" I replied, "If you do that, I'll follow you anywhere. Go for it, man. I would love to see you do it." My plan was to get his effing ass out of the apartment and lock the door so my mom and girlfriend would be safe, and pray to this guy's dad that I can run faster than him and make it to a payphone to call 911. He looked at me with his crazy ass eyes and said, "You trying to get me caught, mother effer?" I said, "No miracles." He raised up his roofing hammer and told me the only way I was following him anywhere was in the afterlife. It was at that point I thought, I'm going to die, and then he's going to kill my mother and girlfriend. I came to the sudden realization that I no longer cared if Jesus' mental breakdown would be affected by me beating the shit out of him or not. That was no longer my problem. Mid-rant about some religious shit about 2 inches from my face, I swung as hard as I could and punched him right in the sternum. He still had the hatchet cocked over his shoulder, like someone throwing a football, so the blow caused him to lose his balance and fall over a dining room chair. He crumpled in a heap, and my mother, ever the cool head, screamed at me for hitting him. I had knocked the wind out of him, and he was gasping for air. My mother assumed he was dying. I would learn later in adulthood my mother was not the brightest light bulb. My girlfriend booked out the door with me close behind after grabbing my mother's arm and dragging her out the door. I called the police, and they came and got him. Last I heard, he was in a hospital after he locked himself in a bedroom, still saying he was Jesus. He was committed after he used a metal throwing dart to pick veins out of his arm. Never did get to see him walk across that lake, though. I know it's very rare that I would come in back-to-back stories, but Jesus Christ, I had to talk about this story. From his explanation of him being broken out by the Pope and being a roofer, it was enjoyable. And if it's real, more power to you, and I hope your family's doing better now. I'm shocked by all these stories of psychopath children and adults letting their kids be around them even after one incident. When I was about 4, my cousin tried sticking a stick up my ass. He literally lifted me off the ground with the stick, and it only stopped with my screams, and my dad ran outside. I was never around my cousin again. I never saw him again. He would have been 6 at the time, and at 23, he died of a heroin overdose after getting out of prison. When I was about 11 or 12, and my brother was around 6 or 7, I was woken up one night by my mom jumping on or over me like a flying tackle. I had a pedestal bed that had enough room between it and the wall for walkways on both sides, and she came out of there with my brother and an axe. My brother and I had separate bedrooms, mine at the very end of the house and his just 5 to 10 feet from my door. Her bedroom was at the far end of the house. She had woken up suddenly and had the urge to check on us. When she got to his room first in the hallway, she saw his bed was empty. When she walked into mine, he was standing over me, 1 foot on either side of my body, with the axe raised over his head. He was standing still and staring at me, like he was trying to decide if he was going to do it. She sprinted in and tackled him off me before he could do it. That was the first in a long line of insane incidents with him, and it's been about 18 years since. My younger brother, who I'm still living with, has about 2 months ago started to get very aggressive toward his classmates and has also been kicking our dogs and things like that. My parents have tried to punish him, but the only way they feel as if they can get through to him is through spanking him and whatnot. He's told me all this does is make him more angry, and about 2 days ago he told me, "You're pretty unlucky you don't have a lock on your door." Some nights I also wake up to weird noises in the hallway connecting my room to his. So yeah, that's worrying. To preface this, I have to share a bit of background. An aunt of mine had serious psychopath tendencies, coupled with depression and a few things, I'm sure. Anyways, she was cutting my uncle's hair, who was going bald. He liked his hair cut short, but there still has to be hair. Well, she set the clippers a bit too low and shaved a massive chunk of his hair off. We're talking damn near skin level. My uncle reacted how you would think, slightly pissed, but just laughed it off. Well, my aunt took offense to this and decided to get the scissors out and chop the ponytail off her own head and try to make him feel better. She did this in front of me, in a different room than my uncle. Me, not knowing what was going on, started laughing. She went hysterical and started swinging and jabbing the scissors at me, trying to get my hair, supposedly, so my uncle finally restrained her. Swear to God, I thought I was one lucky jab by her from dying. TL, DR. Aunt messed up shaving my uncle's head. She overreacted to her own mistake and chopped her own hair off. I laughed. She lunged and jabbed at me with scissors.